Welcome to Taking the Reins, the podcast where we dive deep into the bond between horses and the people who love them. Whether you're a seasoned rider, an inspiring equestrian, or simply a horse enthusiast, each episode brings you inspiring stories, expert insights, and tips to enrich your journey with these magnificent animals. Join our community on social media. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all at Taking the Reins MS State, for exciting videos that celebrate the world of horses. So saddle up and get ready to take the reins on your passion. This is Taking the Reins.
From Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi, this is Taking the Reins podcast. If you love all things horses, get ready for a relatable and educational look into the lives of horses and the people who love them. Now here's our host, Clay Cavender.
Annise Montplaisir is our guest today. She is the co-founder and executive director of Amplify horse racing, which she's going to talk in depth today. But Annise, thank you very much for being on the podcast, and I think you'll have a great story for our viewers.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on. I'm always excited to share with fellow horse lovers and share the story of Amplify.
Well, this came about at the right time because, interestingly enough, here in the South, everyone knows that thoroughbred horse racing is not a driver, if you will. It's not the main thing. Of course, we got to get up to Kentucky and over to Florida to really kind of get to the heart of the horse country in that capacity. But I actually am currently putting together a trip for our undergraduates to go and try to start exploring a different sect of the horse industry, because we have such a horse-interested student body. But thoroughbreds aren't always what maybe we think about. And knowing that you're from North Dakota, that had to have been the same case for you. Where did your whole idea about horse racing and thoroughbred racing, where did that interest come from?
Yeah, I get that question quite a bit because I don't have a very common background in how I came into the industry. But I fell in love with horses when I was very young, and my mom had always wanted to get into horses. And so we ended up getting a pony when I was 8 years old and getting really involved in the 4-H horse project, which was such a great experience for me in building my early, foundational horse knowledge. And I actually saw a movie about a racehorse. The movie is called Ruffian. So it's about the story of the racehorse Ruffian. And that was when I was around 12 years old. And I had seen other horse racing movies, like Dreamer, I believe, was already out, and Seabiscuit, and a few others. But for some reason, nothing had really resonated with me or impacted me like the story of Ruffian. And from that point on, I just knew that I wanted to work in horse racing. And so initially, a lot of young people just think of the mainstream careers that are most in the public eye. And so I thought, well, I started with wanting to be a veterinarian to have a horse career. But then once I became interested in racing, I thought, well, I'm going to be a jockey. But that never really felt like it super resonated with me. And I'm pretty tall. And I also am not about to give up eating a lot of chocolate on a regular basis. And so I was really fortunate to grow up near a small racetrack called the North Dakota Horse Park. And that is based in Fargo, North Dakota. And there are actually two tracks in North Dakota. There's one called Chippewa Downs, which is farther to the northwest of us. And then the North Dakota Horse Park in Fargo. And so really, as soon as I was able, when I was 13 years old, my mom did a surprise birthday party for me out at the horse park. And then I started volunteering. And every summer from there, I moved into different roles at the racetrack and started to see the variety of opportunities that there are in the industry. And so it was there that I discovered an interest in media and communications. But ultimately, probably started to develop a really early interest in education and, how I could get other young people interested in the sport, which we'll probably talk about later on. But that's how I initially became interested in racing and got my foot in the door.
And what was it about the movie Ruffian? You mentioned a few movies, and I don't know that I've seen Ruffian. I've seen Seabiscuit and some of the others you mentioned, but what made it different? What was the spark, so to speak, to get you into racing? And to follow up with that, was your interest at that point with North Dakota, was that quarter horse racing, or was that thoroughbreds up there too?
Yeah. So the movie, or the story of Ruffian, I think, and I haven't seen the movie in many years, so maybe I would have a different perception of it now looking back. But really, her story as a racehorse, she was such an incredible athlete. And the movie did such an incredible job of depicting how much thoroughbreds love to race. Like, a good racehorse generally really loves their job. They've been bred for that. They're trained for it. They're these highly, cultivated, fine-tuned athletes. And the movie showed the team that's around them as well, in that it really brought to light the emotions and feelings and thoughts of her trainer and her owners. And she had quite a tragic story, and there are a couple of really good books, like one is called Ruffian Burning from the Start by Jane Schwartz, which I read immediately after watching the movie. And I just found her story so fascinating, and how it brought to light the team around racehorses and the passion for the sport, and how much the horses really do, love their jobs. And generally, if they don't like their job, they're not competitive and they're retired and they move on to a different role. So that's the story of Ruffian, or what inspired me from it. The North Dakota Horse Park runs a mixed race meet. So now they have quarter horse and thoroughbred racing. But back then, when I first became interested and started going to the track, they ran quarter horse racing, thoroughbred racing, and they had standardbred racing.
Oh, wow.
So after the mixed meet with the quarter horses and thoroughbreds would wrap up, the track would get packed down really hard. The standardbred racing surface is much different from a quarter horse or thoroughbred surface. It's a lot firmer. And so they would pack down the track very firmly, and they would bring in the standardbreds, and they'd have a harness racing meet as well. So I was able to experience a little bit of all of it as I was getting going and becoming interested. But it was really the thoroughbred racing that for some reason captivated me the most. But I did get pretty involved in quarter horse racing and the American Quarter Horse Youth Association's youth programs, like their national racing experience. I ended up actually interning for AQHA for a semester in Amarillo, Texas. And so I did get very involved in quarter horse racing as well, but the thoroughbred racing is what ultimately drew me to Kentucky and led to some really cool international experiences.
What I love about your story is you kind of hit the nail on the head with the mass majority of our undergraduate students in animal science. I teach animal science, but we're a little over 600 students in our department, and you kind of mentioned that you were pre-vet or wanted to be a veterinarian or something to that capacity. And most of the kids, young people, think that there's not much other exploration to do. They just kind of got this idea. I love that you took a dream you watched this movie and you let this seep into you a little bit, and then you explored outside the box. And that is definitely something I love about the podcast that we've tried to really explore, is to get people's story who thought of something different or did something different other than just this normal, not ho-hum, but similar track that a lot of people try to do.
Yeah.
And I love that you did that, especially, and forgive me, but I don't know North Dakota State University very well, but I don't think that they have a strong, really intense horse program. I could be wrong, but you made something of the resources that you had and created a complete career from it. I think that's really neat.
Thank you. And yeah, I think it's I work with a lot of students in my role now, and I think something that's really important to share is, your job might not even exist yet. Like, you could create your role in the industry, and that's what I eventually had the opportunity to do. And the role that I'm in now definitely didn't exist when I was first getting going. So I think it's so important for students to keep an open mind, and if something interests you, chase that, find a way to make it happen, or, create experiences for yourself, and don't be afraid to ask for things. And regarding North Dakota State, I'll be completely honest in that my parents' rule for me was that I wasn't allowed to study anything equine in
Okay.
college. They always wanted me to have, some other, I don't know, backup plan, but skills that would be
Skill set.
applicable
Yeah.
to, yeah, exactly. Skills that would definitely be applicable to the equine industry without directly studying equine. But they respected my decision to want to work in the horse industry and were very supportive of that. And so NDSU does have an equine program, and they have a pretty cool, I believe it's a hippotherapy program, working with youth and therapeutic riding. And I was on our school's IHSA equestrian team riding hunt seat, but I studied management communication and international studies, and I minored in Spanish, and just felt that those were, they were interests of mine, but things that I felt like I could probably use in a variety of ways, regardless of what career path I ended up embarking on. But every single internship I took throughout college was entirely equine focused. And, I did a lot of different hands-on roles, and, my background with 4-H really helped me with that early foundational equine knowledge. So there are so many different ways of forging your path ahead, regardless of what career you want. And some careers are going to be more specific to a certain educational path, and mine wasn't. And I got really lucky in how I embarked on my journey.
Well, that's part of the creation process you talked about. Is you're taking something like communications, combining with what you love, and creating your own thing, platform. I think that's really neat. I try to encourage students a lot in that way too, like for the business and marketing aspect. It's something that's not explored enough, I guess. And so putting those two things together, horses and business, just goes hand in hand. So obviously, communications does too, which kind of leads to another interesting thing is that how have you used your communication degree or ability in, like I know that you've done some Spanish coverage for the Breeders' Cup and some other things. How has that progressed?
I would argue that every young person who's going into a equine career path should have some kind of communications experience along the way, because I think a lot of people go into equine because they probably love horses more than people in a lot of different ways. And the truth of it is, regardless of what job you end up having, you're going to be dealing with people just as much or more than horses, or the people are going to be the challenging part. And so I did several different communications internships along the way. And now, fast forwarding to, I run a nonprofit to get youth involved in the thoroughbred industry. So we're essentially the youth arm of the thoroughbred industry, similar to what AQHYA is for the quarter horse world, but with a strong focus on educating young people about careers. And we have a mentorship program. We're about to launch a curriculum initiative. And so in starting the organization, I really had to develop what our communications are going to look like, from corporate communications and sending internships to our style of writing, our style guide, how we write for Amplify, how we're going to communicate with mentors, mentees, the industry, how I'm training employees. Everything that we do revolves around communication in a lot of different ways, how we're communicating messaging about the thoroughbred industry, how we're educating, all of that is about communications. And so it's funny when I look back at my university time, the class that probably stands out to me the most is conflict communication. That was one class that I had with a professor. And
I wish I had taken that class.
yeah,
That should be on the requirement list.
I mean, I'm certainly no expert in it, but you're going to deal with so many different scenarios in your career, and being able to navigate those with grace and be firm but fair and assertive, and all of those things are really important. So yeah, communications, 10 out of 10 would recommend that students take a communications class or try to do a communications focused internship at some point.
Well, you made another mention to the American Quarter Horse Youth Association, how this kind of mimics Amplify. So let's talk about Amplify horse racing and kind of your role. But you kind of mentioned how it is the youth arm or leg of the industry, thoroughbred industry. But how did this all come about? Like, you had this idea in your head, and then what steps did you take to go ahead and start to implement this, and how was the reception when you started it?
Great questions, and I'll kind of take you on a journey to answer all of those. So when I was interested in getting involved in the thoroughbred industry, I didn't see a lot of direct youth pathways like, hey kids, this is a program about thoroughbred racing.
Mm-hmm.
But AQHA had those programs. And so once I had done the national racing experience through AQHA, I was working at the North Dakota Horse Park one summer when I was in college, and decided to host. They hosted regional experiences for a time where kids could go to a regional experience to qualify for the nationals. So I ended up hosting a regional experience at the horse park, and just loved the sharing with other young people, pulling industry people in to speak, like creating or cultivating that educational experience. So I really enjoyed that. And shortly after I had first become interested in the thoroughbred industry, I had maybe just gotten a Facebook. I was like 13 years old, very early on in learning about the industry and figuring out what my path was going to be. And somebody posted about a program on my Facebook wall, and that program is now called Godolphin Flying Start. At the time, it was called Darley Flying Start. And it's a 2-year international thoroughbred industry management program that you apply for once you have a university degree and at least 1 year's working experience in the thoroughbred industry. And it's a 2-year scholarship to travel to 5 different countries and work and learn in thoroughbred racing. So business practices, breeding practices, racing, and then your capstone project of the course is to create a business plan. And so Flying Start was really the kind of the guiding light of all the internships that I took during college. And after graduating university, I was absolutely obsessed with wanting to do this program and curating a resume and the experience that could get me there. So I graduated university in 2017 and moved down to Kentucky immediately after. I did 3 internships down here. So I had already done several internships. I'm a big advocate for students doing internships. I think they're so important. And I worked for a sales company called Fasig-Tipton. And then I worked for Fasig-Tipton's competitor, which is called Keeneland. It's also a sales company and a racetrack. And then did a yearling sales prep season at a farm. Applied for Flying Start, got in. And it was just such a great experiential learning opportunity to travel to other countries. You start in England, you go to Ireland, you spend time in the US, and then Australia, Dubai, and then you're meant to end the course again in Ireland and graduate in Ireland. But unfortunately, my group caught the beginning of COVID when we were in Dubai and we had to finish the course remotely. But getting back to Amplify, the whole second year of the program is, partially revolves around creating a business plan, which is like your capstone project for the course. And I had already started doing some ideation with a friend of mine who ended up being my co-founder for Amplify about how to create a cool youth initiative in the thoroughbred industry. She comes from Texas. Her name is Madison Scott. So she's from Austin, Texas, and had a similarly winding background or path to get into the industry as I did. And there were just some circumstances that led to us thinking, well, we need to brainstorm about how to get more youth involved in racing. And that ultimately became Amplify, which I took on as my business plan on Flying Start. So that business plan really provided the foundation, or allowed me to do the research and learn about other programs in the education space and create a framework for what Amplify was going to look like thereafter. So that was a long story, but that was the journey to get to the early phases of Amplify.
Well, it's a big undertaking to start something from the ground up. When you got this ball rolling, what was the reception like? Was it favorable, or has it been a kind of a work in progress?
It's definitely been a work in progress, but very favorable. And I don't think it's ever not going to be a work in progress. I think I always want things to be farther ahead than they are, but it was when I graduated Flying Start, I wanted to go immediately into Amplify, and it was COVID. We were in the pandemic. So it was a very weird time to be fundraising for a nonprofit, and especially a concept as new as this. So there were other youth or educational type programs in the industry, but a lot of them were more regionally focused and focused on a specific age group or a specific set of experiences in the industry. And we really wanted to create something broader or kind of all encompassing to create this pathway for youth to get involved in the industry, give them mentorship opportunities, and then ultimately get to where we are now with creating curriculum and getting into classrooms. And so there's been an educational process with the industry, because historically, and I think this is a lot of parts of the equine industry, it's been sort of a grow your own community where if people are raised with horses, they often pass that on to their children, who pass it on to their children, and it turns into this multi-generational business or community. And there's a lot of that in the thoroughbred industry. And so we haven't always looked at these more ingenuitive or innovative ways to teach young people about the sport, or looking in other ways to bring young people into it. And so we're constantly still educating the industry about what Amplify is, what we're doing, why this is important. But at the same time, we've had really great industry backing. We've had some amazing donors, some incredible industry partners. And, it's allowed us to grow to reach, at this point, we're reaching around 20,000 young people per year through the events that we're going to, programming that we're hosting, the reach that we're having live at in-person events. So, in 5 years from now, I'd love to be able to say that we've, we're where we want to be. But at this point, we still really aspire to continue growing and get into a lot of other states beyond Kentucky. But we're basically in 3 states right now. So Kentucky, and we have a program in Illinois as well. And we do a program in Saratoga Springs in New York in the summer. But we're getting there, Clay. We're getting there.
It takes time. You mentioned something I've always said. I've always asked students, a lot of times in my beginning freshman, sophomore classes, how many people in here are a first generation horse interest person? And it's a majority. It's a lot, especially today. I was lucky enough to grow up in a family that did it, but I do realize how hard of a nut to crack the horse business can be. So I applaud 20-year-olds that are trying to figure out their way in this, and they have the tenacity to figure it out. It's a lot to be said for that kind of student. So with that said,
Yeah.
this may be a hard one to answer, but I'm interested in, can you think of a student, a person in particular, that story really captures the impact of Amplify and what you're trying to do?
We actually this morning we were I was with a friend who works in media, and we were doing an interview with one of our mentee graduates. This is a young person who went through our mentorship program. Her name is Julia Siraji, and so our mentorship program it's very unique. Young people who have any level of experience or interest in the equine industry can apply. It's a free program. They share their experience level and their interests, and we try to pair them either virtually or in person with a experience appropriate mentor. So somebody who can guide them on their path, help to educate them about the industry, share, what resources they should be learning about, other youth programs they can get involved in, or undergraduate programs, things like that. So Julia was doing an interview with us for us to create a little Amplify promo video that we're going to have on our website soon. And she shared that, she had come from a cattle farming family. So her parents were into raising cattle. And she is from another part of Kentucky, but from Kentucky originally, and sort of stumbled into the industry because there was a pilot program that another one of my colleagues was doing to get high school students connected to working on horse farms. So she got started working on this horse farm, but still, really didn't know, is this for me? Is this something I'm interested in? I really don't know anything about horses. And the farm she was working at is she was working under one of our mentors. And our mentor said, well, you should really apply to the Amplify mentorship program. So she did. She ended up getting connected to a veterinarian here in Kentucky, Dr. Rhonda Rathgaber, who works with Hagyard Equine. And Julia just fell in love with the veterinary side of the industry. And her mentor was able to bring her around, allow her to job shadow, introduce her to other people, other avenues in the industry. Ultimately, through our mentee graduate community, Julia met other mentees, including one named Emma Nunn. And through Emma's mentor, the two of them got connected to going and working out at Breeders' Cup, which is our world championships of horse racing, which takes place in November each year. And so it just really opened up this whole wide network of opportunities to her that she didn't know were possible before. And, we've had several other mentees who've shared similar testimonials to us that, they maybe heard of the thoroughbred industry or they knew of it, but just had no idea what steps they need to take to actually get involved. And so through this particular program, they're able to, get their foot in the door and learn more about the resources that are out there for them, what people they should connect with, other jobs that they might not have originally thought of. And so I feel like I might have gotten off track from your original question, but that's one story of a particular youth.
I think that's great because, the thing that we don't think about sometimes is that the mentorship idea is really important, and about everything we do. We should always have people probably there in front of us in our careers or our dreams or aspirations or whatever, and some people behind us that we're mentoring. So I like that concept, and I think about there's a friend of mine, former student, Leah Ward. She married a guy, Josh Stevens, in Kentucky, that his background was not in horses, but through the steps you're talking about, some programs you're talking about, he's now big time guy in the thoroughbred industry. And so it can be done, but you have to kind of set the tone. You got to set out the path like you did, find the right ways, find the right people, network, and kind of, I love the creation that you are talking about. That's important. I wish we could get that point across more to our 18, 19, 20-year-old students that are kind of, I'm not going to say floundering a little bit, but kind of lost sometimes. Or have a pie in the sky idea, but they don't know how to make it a reality. some of the stuff you're talking about is great advice for them. Why does the mentorship idea that you're just speaking about, do you think that's a real game changer? We kind of are alluding to the fact that it is, but is that uniqueness that you create in your Amplify program, do you see that as a game changer for them? Is that process really working, or does it have some room for improvement?
We've every year that since it started, we've tried to make improvements to make it more effective. But going back to when I started the research for Amplify, a big part of the early process was doing what's called customer discovery. So, talking to people in the racing community to learn about, how they got into the industry, what programs they relied on, where the gaps are, where there's room for improvement. And something that really came through in that phase of the research were a lot of young people who didn't grow up in racing generally got connected to a mentor some way or somehow. Sometimes it was by chance, like they just happened to have a neighbor who was really into horse racing and had people that they were able to connect them to. Or maybe it was through a friend, or, I've had so many amazing mentors through the internships that I've done. It could be an employer. There are a lot of different ways of establishing a mentor out there. But there were a lot of times in their journeys, there was somebody who was really impactful that opened doors to where they are today. And so in creating Amplify, we wanted to create a more structured path for young people to follow involving mentorship, because one of my biggest pet peeves in the industry is hearing people say, oh, well, it's a very welcoming industry. All you have to do is, you can cold call people or email them, and it's so easy to get connected. But to me, that's not a concrete path to tell a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old, like, the best way to get connected is to email, send cold emails or cold call people. We have to have a structured pathway for them to follow that's, relatively safe, kind of following tried and true methods. And so in creating the program, we followed what's called the elements of best practice, or elements of effective practice for mentorship. And it's the best practices in creating a youth mentorship program where we have an application process for both mentors and mentees. We have a training and onboarding process, so they're both prepared for the experience. We have a pretty strategic matching and introduction process to make sure that we're pairing people appropriately and we're not just throwing them together. We provide a lot of guidance and resources for them to follow along the way. So every mentor-mentee pair has their own Google Classroom and sample conversation topics, meeting ideas, conferencing options, all sorts of things. And it's a 3-month program guided by Amplify. And then at the end of those 3 months, that's basically the time that we facilitate the mentorship. So once it formally ends under us, we hope that we've set it up to be, continue in a more organic fashion, that mentors and mentees are going to continue meeting beyond the program and have that long-term connection. And this year was the first year that we really have felt like, we're in almost a perfect spot with this program. There's always going to be room for improvement, but we've created the right amount of structure, the right amount of guidance where mentors still have to step up and use their knowledge, use their connection, use their ingenuity to a certain extent, but we're here guiding and supporting the program. We've created this great mentor and mentee community and network so that once they graduate, they're connected to other mentors and mentees. And we've been getting really good feedback. So I think our main struggle at this point is getting more mentors into the system, people who are willing to devote a certain amount of time over the course of 3 months do the training process, be willing to do a background check since they might be working with kids under 18, and put in, share their expertise. And then, we probably need to grow our staff to be able to facilitate more mentees, but we're at a really good spot with the program right now for young people to be able to have this structured onboarding experience into the industry.
That was kind of where I was going with my next question or thought, was be from the mentor perspective. I know enough about the horse business on my end, maybe not thoroughbreds, but on my end, it is a welcoming community. You definitely have to be proactive in your own right. Mm-hmm. But I think they have time for you if you're a hard worker and a hustler. If you're not, they don't. And so my question here is kind of like, what has the mentor reception been about? Because I can see a lot of these guys that, man, I'm sure they're completely enthralled and busy in their own world. And to take on, especially a kid, 16, 17-year-old, it would work if they work, and it wouldn't work if they didn't, if you get what I mean. So how's that mentor reception been? Has it been like everybody wants to be a part of this, or has it been kind of hit and miss, or as they see the progression and the success that you're having, more people are coming on board, I'm sure?
We try to make sure that mentors, before they come on board, understand the expectations that it is a structured program. You are going to be devoting, around 10 hours over the course of 3 months. Not every mentee is going to come into it and love the equine industry, but it ends up being that the vast majority of the mentors and mentees who come into the program develop great connections. We've had several who've gone on to work for their mentors or go on to work for people who their mentors have introduced them to. But it's not the program for everyone. We call it a observational and conversation-based learning experience because it's not an internship. It's not hands-on. It's not paid. It's a free program that's meant to allow a young person to shadow and ask questions and better understand different career fields in a pretty structured way, and hopefully come out of it with somebody who can serve as a reference and a connection to them going forward. So if a mentor isn't interested in having that level of structure and oversight by, an organization like Amplify, they might want to go with something a little more organic. But for those who are really interested in bringing young people into the industry and allowing for this great exploration experience that provides a lot of guidance and support from Amplify, it's worked out really well for the vast majority who've come through.
So what do you think the advice for the student is that wants to take this next step? Maybe they're nervous about doing it, or maybe they just don't know. They probably need to be aware that internships are meant to give us a insight into whether we do want to do this or we don't want to do this. What would be the main piece of advice you would have for students who, for lack of a better term, love horses but don't know what their next step would be?
I think two things. First, you're going to get out of anything what you put into it. And so I find that a lot of students who come through our program get really stuck on feeling like they need to have a certain structure or pathway or make the right decision about exactly what internship they're going to do. Just do something, stay active, because whether it's perfect, whether it's something you enjoy or don't enjoy, you're still going to learn something from it. So do something, and work hard at it. You're going to get out of that experience or opportunity the same amount that you put into it. So if you're not going to work hard, if you're not going to be fully committed or engaged or prepared in whatever experience it is, you're not going to benefit from it. But if you come and wholeheartedly know that you're going to give it your best shot, you're going to learn as much as you can, you're going to benefit from that experience. And then I guess I kind of already touched on this. But the second piece is, even if you absolutely hate something, then great. You have learned what you don't want to do. And I think that's a really amazing thing about internships or mentorship is that if you're doing a structured program, you're getting yourself into something for a defined period of time. Most internships have a set starting point and a set ending point. And so you can trial something, you can see if you enjoy this particular role or what you do or don't like about it for a set amount of time without locking yourself into a full-time job. And so I found it really useful to do internships throughout college because I found things that I knew immediately I didn't want to do. So I was going to learn as much as I could during the time I was doing it and then never wanted to do it again.
Right.
And then there were other things where it was like, this is awesome. This is definitely bringing me closer to what I do want to do. So in summary, there's no right or wrong answer. Just do something, put as much work into it as you can, and you're eventually going to find, the exact direction in the industry that you want to go into.
I have found when you do that and you work at it really hard, it seems like things work out well. The pieces kind of go into place. Let's switch just a little bit to the thoroughbred industry as a whole. I've just got a couple of questions of my own intrigue. What do you think would surprise people the most about horse racing careers? Is there a misconception or idea out there that people don't really think about until you're involved in it, entrenched in it, and you go, oh, wow, I never thought about this thing? What do you think would be surprising most people about horse racing?
About careers specifically or about the industry in general?
Working within the thoroughbred industry.
I think the number of travel opportunities, and I can't speak to other aspects of the equine industry to know the amount of travel involved in certain jobs, but there are a lot of jobs in thoroughbred racing, given that it's very national and international. There are racetracks across the country and in many different countries, that there are a lot of great opportunities and a lot of different roles to be able to travel and experience the industry on a broader basis than just the state that you're based in. That's not going to be every job, but a lot of jobs have some kind of travel component to them, which can add a really exciting element.
Or maybe you don't want to do that too, right? You may
exactly. And maybe you want to stay put. So I guess a good example is a lot of young people are really excited to work on the racetrack. And because when you work for a trainer, it's a kind of a traveling circus, so to speak. Like trainers have strings of horses in different locations and generally race on a circuit. So there's one trainer I know who will be based in Kentucky for part of the year, and then over the winter races at a track called Fairgrounds in Louisiana, and then comes back up to Kentucky, and we'll have horses based in Kentucky from spring throughout summer, and then another base of horses in Saratoga Springs, New York, and they'll do that circuit every year. So that lifestyle can be very exciting for a young person or person of any age, really, who wants to be traveling and moving a lot. And then you'll see a lot of times as people become more settled in their life, maybe they want to buy a house and get married and have a place of their own. A lot of times you'll see people transition into the farm side of the industry in order to have a more stable, stay in one place kind of position.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I think about the thing that we don't talk enough about in the industry is that the perception, especially from the young person, is typically they're going to the big shows or the big horse race. Who has not watched the Kentucky Derby? Everybody's seen that, right? And so if we look at it from that lens, it's, wow, they have really nice clothes on and they're having a lot of fun and they got these cool hats and it's so pretty and this neat environment and the horses are nice. But what you don't see is all the sweat equity that went into that.
Yeah.
That one moment. And so we see that on our side too. People go to the World Show and they go, this is what I want to do. I want to drive a nice truck and trailer and have these shiny horses and pretty tack and show under the lights. In reality, those guys are workaholics. They
Yeah.
work all the time to get to that one moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you start out as a groom or you consider the team around one racehorse, I mean, there's so many people employed by just a single racehorse, but grooms and hot walkers are getting to the track by 4 a.m. every day, maybe even 3:30,
Mm.
um, giving morning feed, checking legs, checking temperatures, preparing horses for morning training, bathing and cooling down horses from training. You have exercise riders who are different from jockeys. You have people who ride horses during specifically for their morning training. You have jockeys who are professional race riders who are riding in races. Sometimes they'll ride a horse in advance of a race, get on them in the morning for a timed workout called a breeze. You have trainers, assistant trainers, barn foremen, veterinarians, farriers, equine dentists, nutritionists, suppliers of different kinds. You have all these adjacent roles from marketing to communications, stallion sales, so getting mares booked in to visit different stallions, the breeding side of things. Like there are I like to compare it to working for a professional sports team. Working in racing, you're always somehow part of a horse's team in some way.
There's a place for
And
everybody.
yes,
There really is. You
exactly.
just got to sometimes figure out what place is the best fit.
Yes.
Back to Amplify, just for the last question here on Amplify, I'm just curious of where do you hope, or what is your vision for the future in the 5 or 10 years, or maybe even like your perfect program? Where is it yet to go?
When I look at thoroughbred racing, I see this amazing opportunity to leverage the thoroughbred industry to get people connected to horses. Like when you look at big cities and where people can go to see animals, it's either a dog park, a zoo, or a racetrack. And we have a number of very prominent racetracks in big cities across the country. In New York, we have Belmont Park, which has recently undergone this amazing new transformation. There's Aqueduct, which is going to be going away soon to focus more on Belmont. But so we've got Belmont, we have Santa Anita, which is near Pasadena, California, Del Mar, which is close to San Diego. We have Turfway Park near Cincinnati here in Kentucky, Churchill Downs in Louisville. Like across the country, we can pinpoint a lot of these really prominent racetracks that are in or near big cities. And so I would like for Amplify to have youth engagement programs at every major racetrack around the country, and for kids to be able to come to these racetracks, to be hands-on with horses, to have different classroom connections. So for teachers to be able to connect the subject materials that they're teaching their kids or the standards they need to meet to racing or the equine industry in some way, shape, or form. And then have this amazing pathway from that first touch point that a kid learns about horses or learns about racing to be able to continue that engagement to the point that they decide to, get involved in a mentorship or pursue an internship, get into a career. So yeah, have Amplify at all major racetracks across the country with programs that connect classrooms to horses, and then have the right pathways to keep them involved in the industry moving forward. That's my dream for Amplify in 10 years from now.
I love your vision for that. And if any of our listeners want to get plugged in or find out more information about you, amplifyhorseracing.org is the place to do it. And you got a great website, great easy ways to contact you. You've been extremely accessible just from an initial email, so I appreciate that. And so before we go, I do want to just touch real quick, real brief on this whole thing you were doing with the Breeders' Cup, and you were covering for the Spanish TV station.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give us any examples? Is this the kind of thing where it's play-by-play type of thing, or were you just talking about horses in general? How'd that go?
I got into that when America's Best Racing is this fan development initiative in the horse racing industry. And several years ago, they reached out to me looking for a project manager to lead the charge on a live stream, like a social media live stream, talking about horse racing in Spanish every week. And so I learned how to speak Spanish as a child through a school program and then continued studying it through university. And so I got plugged into being part of that show with two other co-hosts, just talking about horse racing in Spanish, having cool guests on. You know, the vast majority of our top jockeys in the country and a lot of horse racing's workforce are, Latino or Latina. And so we wanted to create an outlet for, people who speak Spanish to engage with horse racing. And that ended up translating into a project with Breeders' Cup, doing coverage of this race series called the Win and You're In series. And it ended up, as Amplify continued to grow, I just didn't have time to continue with the side hustle of the Spanish stuff, but I still use my Spanish a lot in my job with Amplify. And I actually just got back from a trip to Argentina to go play polo.
Nice.
And that the Spanish was very, very helpful. So I continue to speak Spanish. I use it in my job a lot. 10 out of 10 would recommend, learning a second language, but it's been a cool journey.
When I read that, I actually thought maybe you were the color commentator kind of guy. I was going to see if you could, in Spanish, give us a play-by-play of a horse race or something, but I guess that's not what you did. It's still very cool. I love how you combined a lot of interest into a passion, communications, second language, horse racing. You've kind of done it all. And I really appreciate your time on this topic. I think it's a great idea, and it's a great avenue for our students and other listeners, young or old, if they want to start a second career. Whatever they want to do, they can do it if they put in the work and the sweat equity we talked about. So thank you very much, Annise, for your time and discussion about Amplify.
Thank you, Clay, for inviting me to be on, and thank you to all the listeners out there for tuning in. Please don't hesitate to contact us and follow Amplify Horse Racing on social media. We're very responsive on all platforms, so go ahead and reach out.
Thank you for joining us on Taking the Reins. A special thank you goes to the Mississippi State Extension Service and the MSU Animal and Dairy Sciences Department. Please visit us on Facebook and Instagram at Taking the Reins Podcast.